Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. So, what chapter do you all want to do today?
And did we do the making of the global world?
Okay, just a minute. Hi, Rizwana. Hi, Citri.
Hi, ma'am.
Hi. Okay, so we are going to do making of the global world. Fine. I'm going to share my screen, and here we are. Fine. So we are going to do. Okay. When we talk about globalization, we often refer to an economic system that has emerged since the last 50 years or so. But as you will see in this chapter, the making of global world has a long history of trade, of migration, of people in search of work, the movement of capital, and much less. Okay. So, in this chapter, so mm, the countries in which are present time are very much connected to each other. They are connected through trade, ideas, businesses, import, export, and travel. We are living in an era of globalization. Even thousands of years ago, people traveled across countries, but they were not as immersed as we are today. Why? Because today you can say that we have kind of contracted the world because of communication and because of easier communication, easier transportation. Now, in a summary, what is globalization? So globalization is the movement of goods, capital, services, ideas, and people from one nation to other nation is called globalization. Okay. So in ancient time, travelers, traders, priests, pilgrims traveled around distances for various purposes. Like you must have seen Gautam Buddha. He was born in India, but we have very less Buddhists here. But we have more Buddhists in Japan. We have more Buddhists in Tibet and in China. Why? Because people traveled, and they traveled along, and they began spreading religion. In ancient times, religion was spread from one place to another by priests. Priests migrated from one place to another, spreading the messages of religion. So Islam was spread, and Christianity was spread, Buddhism was spread. Okay, and I think it is only the Hinduism that was not spread in a lot. Although Hinduism was the most ancient religion, but mostly Christianity and Islam was spread by migration from one place to another one. Okay, also we can see knowledge was spread. You can say potato came from America to all over the world. Okay, and knowledge was spread. Technology traveled from one place to another one. Spiritual fulfillment. Okay, so still today people come from around the world to learn yoga, right? To learn about Ayurveda, to learn also to learn what is this, motivation, meditation, and all that. So also globalization means they also carry different things like goods, skills, ideas, money, inventions, also germs and diseases. So when you can say when America was discovered, people from Europe traveled to America. They didn't just go there; they also spread germs. Okay, and many the Native Americans over there, they was infected by a lot of germs, and the Americans and the sorry and the Europeans told them they like kind of. They kind of surrendered because of the disease. Okay, that was they surrendered because of and they laid down their weapons in return for medicine. Yeah, so present time we have found many evidences of trade link in ancient times, such as cowries, that is seashells, used as currency for trade. This is the monetary system of the olden times. Apart from this, there are many other examples of ancient international trades. Now we see here the Silk Route. So if you can see here, you can see how the Silk Route is traveling from China, and it is traveling toward by land route toward all over Europe. Okay, and Silk Route was a network of an ancient trade route which connected Asia, Europe, and Africa. Silk Route existed since before the Christian era in 15th century. Okay, so also from India, it traveled from through Leh. Okay, and then it traveled to all over the Europe. So from India, it was from China it was silk, and from India it was spices and also textiles. Many goods travel through this route, such as Chinese pottery, Indian textile, spices, from Asian market to European market, and in return, precious metals like gold and silver flowed from Europe to Asia. So from India and China, pottery, textiles, and spices went, and from there came gold, silver. Okay. Now also Christian missionaries, Muslim preachers, Buddhist monks, they travel through this route for spiritual fulfillment to promote culture. Okay. So this is how cultural mixing went on. The Silk Route was a good example of vibrant pre-modern trade and cultural links between distant parts of the world. So let us read the chapter. Anybody want to read? Citri, do you want to read? Okay, I'll do one thing. I'll read myself. Fine. So, although history, human societies have become steadily more interlinked, from ancient travelers, traders, priests, and pilgrims traveled vast distances of for knowledge, opportunities, and spiritual fulfillment, or to escape persecution. Means if there somebody has committed a crime in one place, what they did, they traveled to another country. This is still happening. Many people from Pakistan have fled to Europe and have taken asylum. Okay, they carried goods, money, values, skills, ideas, inventions, and even germs and diseases. As early as 3000 BC, an active coastal trade links in the Indus Valley civilization with present-day West Asia. For more than a millennia, cowdies, that is in Hindi cowdy, or seashells, used as a form of currency from the Maldives found their ways to China and East Africa. The long distance spread of disease carrying germs may be traced as far as by the 17th century. By the 13th century, it had become an unmistakable link. Okay, let's talk about the Silk Route. The Silk Routes are a good example of vibrant and pre-modern trade and cultural links between distant parts of the world. The name Silk Route points to the importance of the westbound Chinese silk cargoes along with this route. Historians have identified several silk routes over land and by sea, knitting together vast regions of Asia and linking Asia with Europe and Northern Africa. Okay, they have known they are known to have existed before since before the Christian era and thrived almost till the 15th century. But Chinese pottery also traveled the same route as did textile and spices from India and Southeast Asia. In return, precious metals, gold and silver flowed from Europe to Asia. Trade and cultural exchange always went hand in hand. Early Christian missionaries almost certainly traveled this route to Asia, as did early Muslim preachers a few centuries later. Much before all this, Buddhism emerged from eastern India and spread in several directions through intersecting points on the Silk Route. Okay, so this was the Silk Route. Now, next we are going to talk about food travels. How food was traveled all along. Food travels of spaghetti and potato. Food offers many examples of long distance cultural exchange. Traders and travelers introduced new crops to the lands they travel. Even ready food stuff in distant parts of the world might share common origins. Take spaghetti or noodles. It is believed that noodles traveled west from China to become spaghetti, or perhaps Arab traders took pasta to the 5th century Sicily, an island now in Italy. Similar foods were also known in India and Japan. So the truth about their origins, many may never be known. So it food travels so much here and there. So even today, the biryani is eaten kind of all over the world. Nobody knows where it is actually origin. Okay, so yet such guesswork suggests that possibilities of long-distance cultural contact even in the pre-modern world. Many of our common foods such as potatoes, soya, groundnuts, maize, tomatoes, chilies, sweet potatoes, and so on were not known to our ancestors until about five
Ma'am,
centuries ago. Yeah.
I'm not chilies and tomato. No
Yeah.
chilies and tomatoes for like 5 centuries ago.
Yeah, I think potatoes was first, I think, grown in by Native American, the Red Indian. It was only in America, and
But these
after
chilies,
from
ma'am,
it is
they are,
chili.
where are they from?
Do you have any idea?
No, ma'am, like imagine a world without chilies. At least
Yeah,
Indian
I
food.
think it was. I think the spices were. I think Brazil is was producing chili, and India was making, I think, chili, and we have black pepper here in India. We have especially the black pepper because of the spices. The British came to conquer India because of the spices.
Yes.
Okay, mainly they wanted spices. Okay, so similar foods. We'll read that in further for the note. So the truth about their origins may never be known, yet such guesswork suggests and possibilities a long distance cultural contact, even in the pre-modern world. Many of our common foods such as potato, soya, groundnut, maize, tomatoes, chilies, sweet potatoes, and so on were not known to our ancestors until about 5 centuries ago. These foods were only introduced in Europe and Asia after Christopher Columbus accidentally discovered the vast continent that would later become known as America. So potatoes was first grown only in America. We have potatoes everywhere, but it was first grown in America, and it was introduced in Europe and Asia after the discovery of America. Okay, in fact, many of our common foods came from America's original inhabitants, the American Indians. Sometimes the new crop could make the difference between life and death. Europe began to eat better and live longer with the introduction of the humble potato. Okay, now people began to live. Imagine now people who used to die because they did not have potato. This is really hilarious.
Yes,
Now
ma'am.
Europe poor began to eat. Yeah.
Nothing, ma'am. Just agreed to that point.
So this is I find it funny, like I think I never realized the importance of potato, but yes, I think today when you don't know what to cook, you start to cook potato, right? Let's make
Yes,
mashed
ma'am.
potato. Let's make uh, what is it, fried potatoes or anything, zira aloo and all that we can make. So it is something you can say kind of a staple food for us, potato. And people, the poor, and because it was cheaper, so it was the poor people of Europe when they faced a crisis, like we read in history, when they faced crisis, uh, they began to like depend on potatoes. So began to eat better and live longer with the introduction of the humble potato. Ireland's poorest peasants became so dependent on potatoes that when disease destroyed the potato crop in the mid 1840s, hundreds of thousands died of starvation. Okay, let's talk about conquest, disease, and trade. The pre-modern world shrank greatly in the 16th century after European sailors found a sea route to Asia and also successfully crossed the western oceans to America. For centuries before, the Indian Ocean had known a bustling trade with goods, peoples, knowledge, customs, etc. Crisscrossing its waters. The Indian subcontinent was central to these flows and a crucial point in their network. The entry of the European helped expand or redirect some of these flows towards Europe. Before his discovery, America had been cut off from regular contact with the rest of the world for millions of years. People did not even know people of Europe and Asia were together. But even people of Asia and people of Europe, they had no idea there was a continent called America also. So I think it was their bad luck that Vasco da Gama, Christopher Columbus discovered America. Okay, so but from the 16th century, in vast lands and abundant crops and minerals began to transform trade and lives everywhere. Precious metals, particularly silver, from mines located in present day Peru and Mexico, also enhanced Europe's wealth and financed its trade with Asia.
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am,
Yeah,
I
good.
just joined. What were you explaining till now?
Okay, hi Sumuk. We were doing making of the global world. Okay, and we are reading the chapter. And so far we have discussed the Silk Route, and there was a how globalization took place, and how food had traveled. If you now we are doing about conquest of disease and trade. So we are reading the chapter and we are doing explanation. Okay. So let's talk about yeah, we were here. Precious metals, particularly silver from mines located in present day Peru and Mexico, also enhanced Europe's wealth and financed its trade with Asia. Legends spread in the 17th century Europe about South America fabled wealth. Many expectations set off in search of El Dorado, the fabled city of gold. So there were stories spread, in Europe that there are gold mines and there is a gold valley and there is a gold city and all that. So many people went off on voyages to explore. So the Portuguese and Spanish conquest and colonization of America were decisively underway by the mid 16th century. European conquest was not just the result of superior firepower. In fact, the most powerful weapon of the Spanish conquerors was not a conventional military weapon at all. It was the germs, such as those or smallpox, that they carried on their person. Because of their long isolation, America's original inhabitants had no immunity against these diseases that came from Europe. Smallpox, in particularly, proved a deadly killer. Once introduced, it spread deep into the continent ahead even of any European reaching there. It killed and decimated whole communities, paving the way for conquest. So it was not the weapons that they used to conquer. They used germs because they had the medicines and they had the medicines and they were also you can say immune. But because America and had been cut off from the world, so they did not their immunity power they didn't have any immunity towards these germs. So even before they came to conquer, they were already suffering from this deadly germ. So smallpox is as you all know is deadly. So guns could be bought or captured and turned against the invaders, but not disease such as smallpox, which to which the conquerors were mostly immune. Okay, so they did not fall sick, but the natives fell sick. Okay, now until the 19th century, poverty and hunger were common in Europe. Cities were crowded and deadly diseases were widespread. Religious conflicts were common and religious dissenters were persecuted. What is dissenter? The one who refuses to accept established belief and practices. Okay. So whenever they found that this person is a non-believer, he is not believing in God, so they would execute that person. Okay, so I would say the countries were, or you can say the kingdoms were ruled by the law of religion. Thousands therefore fled Europe for America. Here, by the 18th century, plantations worked by slaves captured in Africa were growing cotton and sugar for European markets. Now, until well into the 18th century, China and India were among the world's richest countries. They were also preeminent in Asian trade. However, from the 15th century, China is said to have restricted overseas contact and retreated into isolation. Okay. China's reduced role in the rising importance of the America gradually moved the center of world trade westwards. Europe now emerged as the center of world trade. Okay, because China had isolated itself, it stopped trading with outsiders. I think it was because of the because of the invasions and also because of the germs, because of the fright of the germs. So that China isolated, and this gave paved way for the Western Europe. Okay, take the let's take up the summary here. Yeah, yeah. So European discovered Asia and America through sea route in the 16th century. With this, the trade had become easier. In the 16th century, America was very rich in terms of resources. They had different food crops and precious metal silver. Many expeditions were set off in search of El Dorado, that is the city of gold. This led to the conquer of America by Europe. So in the mid 16th century, the Portuguese and Spanish set off to conquer America, not with military or arms, but with spread of germs and diseases in America. The Native Americans had weak immune system and they were caught up with diseases like smallpox and chickenpox. Europe easily captured America with the help of disease without military. Until the 19th century, Europe was suffering from different problems like diseases, poverty, religion conflict. The population of Europe was also very high. Until well in the 18th century, India and China were the richest countries in the world. However, from the 15th century, China restricted overseas contacts and retreated into isolation. Thus, the importance of America gradually moved the center of world trade from China to Europe. Okay, so because of the population, they began to migrate from Europe towards China, America. Okay, now the 19th century, that was from 1815 to 1914. That was this century. Okay, let's talk about here. All three floors, let's talk about. Okay, the world changed profoundly in the 19th century. Economic, potential, social, cultural, and technological factors interacted in complex ways to transform societies and reshape external relations. Economics, they identify three types of movements or flows within international economic exchange. The first is the flow of trade, which in the 19th century referred largely to trade in goods. That is example is cloth or wheat. The second is the flow of labor, the migration of people in search of employment. The third is a movement of capital for short-term or long-term investments over long distances. Okay, you have to remember these three flows. Okay, the first one was trade. Okay, that was already happening, and then the second came the flow of labor. Okay, what they did, many labors were taken from Asia, that is in India, and also from Africa, and they were made to work for the Europeans resources. Okay, now and the third was when the was a flow of capital and short-term investment. Okay, so all three flows were closely interwoven and affected people's lives more deeply now than ever before. The interconnections could sometimes be broken. For example, labor migration was often more restricted than goods or capital flows. Yet it helps us understand the 19th century world economy better if we look at the three flows together. A world economy takes shape. Okay, a good place to start is the changing pattern of food production and consumption in industrial Europe. Traditionally, countries like to be self-sufficient in food, but in 19th century Britain, self-sufficiency in food meant lower living standards and social conflict. Why was this so? Population growth from the late century, 18th century had increased the demand for food grains in Britain. As urban centers expanded and industry grew, the demand for agriculture products went up, pushing food grains prices. Under pressure from landed groups, the government also restricted the import of corn. Okay, the laws allowing the government to do this were commonly known as the corn laws. Unhappy with high food prices, industrialists and urban dwellers forced the abolition of the corn laws. Corn laws. After the corn laws were scrapped, food could be imported into Britain more cheaply than it could be produced within the country. Means it was production was expensive, and buying food from outside became cheaper. So British agriculture was unable to compete with imports. Vast areas of land were now left uncultivated and thousands of men and women were thrown out of work. They flocked to the cities or migrated overseas. As food prices fell, consumption in Britain rose. From the mid 19th century, faster industrial growth in Britain also led to higher incomes and therefore more food imports. Around the world, in Eastern Europe, Russia, America, and Australia, lands were cleared and food production expanded to meet the British demand. So, who were producing? America, Russia, Australia, all these were producing and they were sending to Britain. It was not enough merely to clear land for agriculture. Railways were needed to link the agriculture regions to the ports. New harbors had to be built and old new expanded to ship the new cargoes. People had to settle on the lands to bring them under cultivation. This meant building homes and settlements. All these activities in turn required capital and labor. Capital flowed from financial centers such as London. The demand for labor in places where was in short supply, as in America and Australia, led to more migration. So people from India and Africa were migrated to America, And like you say, you could see, slave trade was started. Nearly 50 people migrated from Europe to America and Australia in the 19th century. All over the world, some 150 millions were estimated to have left their homes, crossed oceans, and vast distances over land in search for a better future. Thus, by the 18th 19th, a global agriculture economy had taken shape. It accompanied by complex changes in labor movement patterns, capital flows, ecologies, and technology. Food no longer came from a nearby village or town, but from thousands of miles away. It was not grown by a peasant tilling his own land, but by an agricultural worker, perhaps recently arrived, who was now working on a large farm that only a generation ago had most likely been a forest. So people began to migrate and work into agriculture. It was transported by railway, built for that very purpose, and by ships, which were increasingly manned in these decades by low paid workers from southern Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean. Some of this dramatic change through on a though on a smaller scale occurred closer home in West Punjab. Here, the British Indian government built a network of irrigation canals to transform semi-desert waste into fertile agricultural lands that could grow wheat and cotton for export. Okay, so the canal colonies are, as the areas irrigated by the new canals were called, were settled by peasants from other parts of Punjab. People were brought into this place, and the British built canals for the agriculture. Of course, food is merely an example. A similar story can be told for cotton. The cultivation of such, of which expanded worldwide to find British textile mills, or rubber indeed, so rapidly did regional specialization in the production of commodities develop that between 1820 and 1914, world trade is estimated to have multiplied 25 to 40 times. Nearly 60% of this trade comprised primary products, that is, agricultural products such as wheat and cotton, and minerals such as coal. Okay. Okay, so we have there. Let's talk about the summary. We have three flows. That was the flow of trade, like trade of textiles, wheat. Trade flows was import of various finished goods and agriculture crops such as silk, cotton, woolen clothes, tomatoes, potatoes, etc. India, being the exporter of raw materials and imports, furnished the foreign goods. Flow of labor, people migrated from one place to another place. Human capital flow of indurated labor was introduced by British. Indurated labor means forced labor. They were that was slave trade. Under the system, labor were recruited and transported to other parts of the world for the production of cotton, tea, sugar, and rail constructions. More than 2 million Indians were transported to Guyana, Uganda, Fiji, Kenya, Trinidad, and South Africa. The conditions of these workers were very bad and wages were extremely low. These workers had no choice but to leave and go abroad. The workers signed a contract of 5 years to work abroad. They received salaries around 8 rupees per month. Many Indians were illiterate. They could not understand what was written in the contract and signed them, which resulted in betrayal and bad faith. Many were misled by the Britishers. They were deported without their consent and knowledge. The conditions of the ships in which they traveled were extremely poor. There was a 17% death rate due to diseases. Okay, now the flow of capital, movement of money from one place to another. Capital or investment flow marked during the war period of World War One. It was estimated that Britain took loan from India to finance the USA during the war. let's make a note. After taking loan from India, the British government increased the taxes and revenues. All these flows have directly and indirectly impacted the lives of people. So the rich India turned into poor and slave because of this flow of capital. Okay. Now the world economy takes shape. Okay. Traditionally, countries like to be self-sufficient in food, but the perception changed in the 19th century. Today
Ma'am,
also we believe, yeah,
when does class end?
class will end at 7:50, I think. We have 5 minutes. Let me finish this summary and then I will end the class. It'll take me only about 2 minutes. Okay, so
Okay.
perception changed in the 19th century. Let's read this. As urban centers expanded and industry grew, the demand for agriculture products went up, pushing up food grain prices. Under pressure from landed groups, the government also restricted the import of corn. The laws allowing the government to do this were commonly known as the corn laws. Unhappy with high food prices, the industrialists and urban dwellers posed the abolition of the corn laws. Okay, after the corn laws were scrapped, food could be imported into Britain more cheaply than it could be produced within the country. Okay, now food and other products started flowing from faraway places. It was no longer grown by the peasant tilling his own land, but by agriculture worker, perhaps recently arrived, who was now working on a large farm that only a generation ago had perhaps been a forest. Okay, now then there was the infrastructure, and then we have okay. We'll continue this later in this class, next class. Okay, anybody have any question, anything to add?
No, ma'am.
Okay, then we can end up the class.
Thank you,
Bye.
ma'am.
Good night.
Bye,
Bye.
ma'am. Good night.
Good night.